Good morning, kids, and today we're checking out a video that was recommended to me from a channel called Node Space Games. And I don't mean recommended to me from the channel itself, I mean recommended as in YouTube is recommending me this video, and the channel is Node Space Games. And today we're checking out the top 10 most tragic monsters in Resident Evil. Let's hop in and see which monster will make us cry.
Even though the Resident Evil franchise is full of iconic and terrifying monsters, some of them you can't help but feel bad for. Sure, when they first try to murder you, or they take the form of a terrifying beast, your immediate thought is to kill them as fast as possible. However, if you take the time to read some files, or learn more details about how this person ended up the way they did, then you start to feel bad for them. From being forced to become the monster in front of you to being motivated by the death of the people closest to them, sometimes the story behind how they ended up this way leaves you wishing there was some way to save them or turn back time. So in today's episode, I'm shining a little light on the tragic villains, enemies, and monsters of Resident Evil. Before that though, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to my channel for more regular videos like this one. Also, leave a like on today's video if you enjoyed today's topic. Anyway, this is Nerd Space Games with my top 10 most tragic Resident Evil monsters. Let's
go.
Get it.
Number 10, we have...
Number 10, Rachel Foley, Resident Evil Revelations.
Rachel Foley?
We start this list off with someone
that?
that's not necessarily a good person, but deserves some sympathy for how things played out for her. Rachel was an agent working alongside her partner Raymond that were both sent to the Queen Zenobia by Morgan in order to destroy the evidence that incriminated him. Unfortunately, Rachel found herself facing off against some ooze monsters, which led to them killing her and feeding on her body. Later, Rachel becomes one of the most terrifying and scariest enemies in the game as she stalks the player throughout the cruise while whispering in creepy voices. What's even more tragic about this character is the fact that she never wanted to go on this mission. She actually tried turning it down because she felt wrong and off about this mission and that she was concerned about her own well-being. Sadly, she didn't have much of a choice and she ended up being proven correct when the mission led to her own death. We didn't spend much time with Rachel, and the time that we did spend with her was full of fear and anxiety as she stalked us throughout the ship. But after reading her journal, it's hard to not at least feel a little...
Also a surprising amount of fan service
sad about her
that I'm hating. Meant to be like...
Number 9, Nosferatu, The Dark Side Chronicles. Nosferatu is a monster that you come across in multiple games, including Code Veronica and a scenario with The Dark Side Chronicles. In both games, it's revealed that Nosferatu was once the father to both Alfred and Alexia Ashford. His real name was Alexander Ashford. While both games paint Alexander as a selfish man who's obsessed with doing right by his family name and someone who is willing to commit some disturbing experiments to make a name for himself, The Dark Side Chronicles shows a little more of the humane side of Alexander. Going back to the beginning though, as the current head of the Ashford family, Alexander was living in the shadow of his father, Edward Ashford, who co-founded Umbrella and therefore was the man that was praised and respected. Unfortunately for Alexander, following his father's leadership, the Ashford family went downhill from here. Because of this, Alexander became obsessed with trying to make a name for himself and redeem the family's name. This pushed him to collect DNA from his ancestor, Veronica, and combine it with a dangerous gene to create super intelligent beings. Ultimately, this gave birth to his children, Alexia and Alfred Ashford. Despite being engineered, for the most part, Alexander treated them as his own. Eventually, Alexia surpassed expectations, with her becoming a chief engineer at the age of 10 years old. For this reason, Alexander began fearing what she was capable of, while also fearing that people would eventually find out about what he had done to create them. So he hid away any evidence of their creation. Over time, Alexia became obsessed with the T-virus and began developing the T-Veronica virus to assist with her world domination. Because of this, Alexander developed a weapon to use against Alexia in the scenario that she succeeded in creating a virus capable of world domination. In Dark Side Chronicles, we learned that Alexander was sad about creating this weapon as he loved his children, but ultimately he saw it as an act of mercy for Alexia to prevent her from going insane. Eventually, Alfred would discover the truth about his and Alexia's creation and would turn his own father over to Alexia, which led to her using him as her first test subject for the T-Veronica virus. And of course, this leads to the creation of Nosferatu. Alexander wasn't a good man by any means. He funded a lot of bad experiments and even dug up the remains of his own ancestor in order to create his children. But it's hard to look past the fact that, one, he loved his children.
So, hold on. Is that You know what? That's probably not the question I should be asking. Moving on.
Proven through him breaking out of his prison after hearing his son Alfred die, and even his reasoning for creating the linear launcher. And two, without him, Alexia's plan would have succeeded. If he didn't create the weapon that Chris used to kill Alexia, then who knows what would have happened. With everything said, it kind of makes more sense for Alexander, aka Nosferatu, to be considered more of an anti-hero than a villain.
We move on to number 8.
Number 8, Pasanta, Resident Evil 4 Remake. While not her actual name, Pasanta is the name given to the Salazar family's housekeeper, as a very loyal and devoted servant to—
Wait, huh? It's a woman?
To Ramon's father, Diago. Pasanta made a promise to look over Ramon prior to Diago's death. Pasanta described Ramon's father as a good man and wanted to help raise Ramon into a good man as well after he lost both his parents. However, due to a disease that would kill Ramon before he reached adulthood, his mother invited a man that is referred to as the Devil, who implanted Ramon with a dominant species of the Las Plagas. Between the disease and the parasite, Ramon grew up deformed and was mocked by other servants. It was because of this that Ramon became bitter and violent, which led to him torturing some of his servants. Pasanta witnessed one of these events when she saw Ramon torture a housekeeper who called him a vile name behind his back. Realizing that she failed his father, Pasanta, despite being distasteful for what Ramon has become, continued to serve out the promise that she made to his father. Ultimately, this led to her being selected as the first test subject for the U3 experiments, which put her through a lot of pain until eventually the experiment created the first version of the Verdugo. This
creating whatever the hell these things are.
Was the same one that we saw stalking Ada throughout the Separate Ways DLC. Pasanta may not be one of the most redeeming monsters of the franchise, as she chose to remain silent and stood by as her fellow servants were tortured and killed in front of her. But it's still somewhat commendable considering her admiration of Ramon's father and her loyalty to him.
So is this thing like the Nemesis?
Was so strong that she suffered so much up until the Plagas took control of her.
Oh, screw it. We move on to number 7 with...
Number 7, Karl Heisenberg, Resident Evil Village.
Wait, what?
Despite how dangerous and evil Heisenberg appears throughout the events of Resident Evil Village, he's actually probably the closest to being good out of most of the family members throughout the game. Unlike the rest of the family, Heisenberg is the only one who despises Mother Miranda for what she's done to him and the villagers. He hates that she has changed the villagers into monsters for her own selfish desires, and despite all that the village and the other family members have done for her, they mean nothing to her outside of the failed experiments that they were. Because of her obsession with reviving her daughter at the expense of the family and the villagers, Heisenberg began staging his own rebellion by creating an army of cyborgs using the corpses left behind. He even...
At least he's using dead bodies and not living ones, so it's... Oh, you know what? It's like the Rihanna Man from Invincible.
Attempted to recruit Ethan into his war against Miranda, but failed when he mentioned using Ethan's daughter, Rose, as a weapon against her. Still, despite the homicidal tendencies and the Frankenstein-like traits that Heisenberg has, he still is someone that obviously cares about the village and the other family members, or he wouldn't be so upset about her using them as experiments. While part of it might be the jealousy that he has for the love that Miranda has for her actual daughter Eva, the fact is that Miranda always showed him the most favoritism out of all of her other test subjects due to him being the closest to a perfect vessel for her daughter until Rose came along.
Oh, well, I'll move on to number 6. Wow, we're kind of going
Number
fast.
6, Evelyn, Resident Evil 7. Evelyn
now this one I can actually agree is pretty tragic. Like, oof.
Might be one of the biggest surprises for this list, as she's not even human. She's a BOW that was created from the mold. But when you dive deeper into the motivations behind Evelyn and what she is, then you can't help but feel bad for her. At least a little, that is. Because, I mean, she does commit genocide and kill hundreds of people. Anyway, starting at the beginning, Evelyn is actually a BOW that was created to end wars before they even begin. Thanks to telepathic abilities, the thought process behind her creation was that she could easily get behind enemy lines and then use her abilities to eliminate enemies without any sort of combat. In fact, she was modeled off of a little girl to make her less intimidating and easier for her to cross enemy lines. Eventually, Blue Umbrella and other organizations became concerned with the research that the Connection was doing, and Mia was forced to take Evelyn and go into hiding with her. During this time, Evelyn grew a strong connection with Mia and began wanting a family to the point where she began calling Mia Mommy. This eventually led to Evelyn breaking out during a hurricane as the ship carrying both Mia and Evelyn crashed into Louisiana near the Baker estate. From here, Evelyn infiltrates the Baker family and begins infecting them as she sees them as her own new family. She then orders them to abduct more people and
let's not forget also causing them to, well, mutilate and mutate.
Add to her family over time. While she's not an actual child, Evelyn's mindset is that of one who just wants her own family. Does she go to extreme measures in securing her family? Absolutely. But you can't help but feel for her as she just wants a family to call her own. Of course, every single time you run into one of her family members, you immediately start feeling less bad for her until you're happy when you finally put her down at the end of the game.
On to number 5, we have...
Number 5, Donna Benevito, Resident Evil Village. Village
okay.
introduced us to a lot of major villains, from the giant vampire woman, Lady D, to a telekinetic Frankenstein, Heisenberg. The game was full of superpowered lords and ladies.
I like how it doesn't even mention the fish guy
that controlled the nearby village. However, out of all the villains in the game, Donna Benevito is the most tragic of the bunch. Going back to Donna's childhood, we learned that both her parents committed suicide, which led to Donna developing psychological problems, including severe cases of anxiety and depression. This is why we see Donna preferring to communicate with everybody around her by using Angie to do all of the talking, Donna's favorite doll created by her father. Other than being mentally ill, Donna wasn't really a bad person prior to Mother Miranda's arrival. However, after implanting Donna with the parasite developed from the mold, she received powers that allowed her to create hallucinations from plants nearby her manor. Plus, the mold had a negative effect on her psyche as it led to it becoming much worse. Still, because of the influence that Mother Miranda had on Donna, she became loyal and devoted to her, which is a major reason as to why she ended up the way she did in Resident Evil Village. Overall, Donna's past kind of showcases someone with a disturbed childhood and a low self-esteem that Mother Miranda took advantage of to serve her own needs.
Took a mentally broken person.
Number 4, Steve Burnside, Resident Evil Code Veronica.
Oh, I know this
Code Veronica, Steve Burnside is actually an ally to Claire Redfield. From the get-go, he and Claire began working together in order to escape Umbrella. Unfortunately for Steve, things don't end up well for him at all. First, we learn why he is on Rockford Island to begin with. His father was an employee of Umbrella who was stealing trade secrets and selling them on the black market. Eventually, his father was caught, and as punishment, Umbrella killed Steve's mom and arrested both Steve and his father. Things only continue to get worse for Steve as an outbreak occurs on Rockford Island, infecting most of the population. It's sometime after the outbreak that Steve reunites with his father, but only after he has become a zombie. To make matters worse, Steve's father, now a zombie, begins approaching a trapped Claire, and Steve has to shoot and kill his own father in order to save her. Throughout the rest of the game, Steve begins developing feelings for Claire until they find themselves at the Antarctic base. It's here where both Steve and Claire are captured by Alexia Ashford. While Claire is left mostly unharmed for whatever reason, Steve, on the other hand, receives the Veronica virus, which ultimately turns him into the Incredible Hulk. That's honestly not even a joke. Still, even in this infected state, we find him fighting against the virus to save Claire and ultimately giving up his life for hers. While Steve isn't a villain at all and is only a monster for a brief moment, I think it's fair enough to allow him to qualify for this list. And after taking a look at his backstory that led up to his death in Code Veronica, it's hard to not give him a spot on this list as one of the most tragic monsters of the franchise.
No, yeah, he's qualified. He can stay.
Number 3, Deborah Harper, Resident Evil 6. Deborah is the sister of Helena Harper, the agent working alongside Leon throughout the events of Resident Evil 6. Neither one of these women has had a happy life, as they both lost their parents, and Deborah eventually found herself in an abusive relationship. One day, Helena witnessed Deborah's boyfriend attacking her and was forced to shoot and kill him in order to protect Deborah. This eventually led to the events of Resident Evil 6 as Derek Simmons, a high-ranking official close to the President of the United States, took this opportunity to abduct and blackmail the sisters. In exchange for Deborah's life, Helena was to assist Simmons on an attack on Tall Oaks and the assassination of the President. Despite the deal that Simmons had with Helena, the man believed in no loose ends and ordered his men to kill Deborah. While this would have been tragic as is, it gets much worse. The family and organization that Simmons was a part of took this opportunity to use Deborah for testing instead of wasting her potential. This led to Deborah becoming the monster that we see in Resident Evil 6, in which Helena is forced to kill her own sister. Deborah ran from one bad situation to another throughout her entire life, and because of her bad luck, she found herself being changed into a BOW that attempted to kill the only person she cared about in her life. That's pretty fucked up.
Honestly, that is kind of messed up. We'll be right back. And we're back. Let's continue with the penultimate, number 2.
Number 2, the Baker family, Resident Evil 7. From the very start of Resident Evil 7, Ethan Winters is stalked throughout the estate by the Baker family. This included Jack Baker and his wife, Marguerite, and their son, Lucas. Now, while Lucas's circumstances are a little less tragic considering that he was always a piece of shit and he wasn't really being controlled by Evelyn, Jack and Marguerite, on the other hand, left us feeling sorry for the two monsters that tried killing us multiple times. Thanks to both a telepathic conversation with Jack and the Daughters DLC, we learned more about how kind and innocent Jack and Marguerite were. Jack ran into a vicious storm to rescue both Mia and Evelyn, while Marguerite offered them a change of clothes and helped take care of them out of the kindness in their hearts. In return, Evelyn saw them as her new family and infected them with the mold. Over the next few weeks, Evelyn eventually gained full control of them and began forcing them to abduct nearby people to bring them into her family.
Yeah.
By the time Ethan comes into the picture, both Jack and Marguerite are completely different people, with Marguerite being a creepy-ass Spider-Woman and Jack becoming Mr. X 2.0. Fortunately, while we don't see a happy ending for most of the family, Zoe Baker, their daughter, is rescued and saved before she ends up just like her parents.
And thankfully she gets to kind of live on with her uncle. Crap, I forgot the guy's name. I was going to call him Bob Baker, but I don't think it's right.
Number 1, Lisa Trevor. Resident Evil remake. No monster or villain in Resident Evil has a more tragic backstory than Lisa Trevor. Daughter of the architect behind the Spencer Mansion, Lisa and her family were captured, tortured, and killed by Umbrella. Because of George's knowledge of the mansion, Oswald Spencer couldn't risk keeping him or his family alive. So George was killed while his daughter and his wife were captured by Umbrella. Even though the orders were to terminate both of them, Umbrella saw it as an opportunity to test various viruses on both of them. This led to both Lisa and her mother receiving different doses that were early forms of the T-virus. Unfortunately for Lisa's mother, the virus failed to bond with her, and the researchers killed her before she attempted to escape with her daughter. Lisa, on the other hand, survived the virus and became one of the most unique BOWs in the franchise. Researchers in the Spencer Mansion began using Lisa for more tests, which ultimately led to Lisa becoming a cocktail of different strains of viruses. These tests continued over 30 years until the events of Resident Evil, where Lisa escaped her prison and began roaming around the estate in search of her deceased mother. Lisa Trevor was only 14 years old when she was abducted by Umbrella, making this story even more tragic. Her story ends with her reuniting with her mother's body and then being trapped by Wesker under a chandelier moments before the mansion exploded, which we assume took Lisa with it.
Yeah, she at least got something. The skull. And then just win. And, alright, I'm a dip. Peace out.
That's it for today's episode of Nerd Space Games. Hit up the comments and let me know what you think of my list. Is Lisa Trevor the most tragic monster in Resident Evil, or can you think of someone else that deserves that title? Let me know down below. Anyway, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and leave a like on today's video. But thanks for watching, and as always, I'll catch you guys on the next episode of Nerd Space Games. Take care.
Alright everyone, that's going to be the end of today's team. I hope you all enjoyed this. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe for more. Link to the original will be in the description below. And I'll see all you kids next time when we flick back on. This is Fox signing out. Peace.